You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
All right, what's going on, Chargers fan? Got a great and special guest. He's been on the LA Football Show before, but we're just going to talk all things Eric Kendricks, newest member of your Los Angeles Chargers. And joining me, as I mentioned, is Matthew Coller. He is the host of the Purple Insider Pod on Blue Wire Pods and also purpleinsider.com. Everything you need, Minnesota Vikings, this is your guy. So, Matthew, I appreciate you jumping on with me and taking the time. And I know we just talked offline, but how are things out in cold, brisk Minnesota?
Yeah, you're not insulting me by saying that because it is cold and absolutely awful outside. So thank God that I am kept warm by free agent news, which is tumbling in for the Vikings and everybody else. It's been a really exciting couple of days for the Vikings, making some big moves that are going to shape their future along with the rest of the league. So I haven't left the house, and nor do I plan on it for at least several more days because we have another snowstorm coming.
Yeah, so we want to get the hot toddies going and bundle up and stay warm talking football, which is nothing wrong with that. I enjoy that too. So, but let me start with this. You know, were you surprised when Kendricks was released? Obviously, I could have my numbers wrong, but I think a 9-year vet, all with the Vikings, obviously one of the staples of that franchise, with different coaching staffs and whatnot. Was it one of those where it's just, hey, cap casualty, new coaching regime, time to move on? Was there a big decline? Was it surprising, or was it more of a, hey, this is just how the business works?
Yeah, I think it would be striking because he's just been a Minnesota Viking for so long. And when somebody is there for a decade and has been there for my entire career covering the team, when I arrived in 2016 to cover the Vikings, Eric Kendricks was a rising star who had kind of elevated his game and taken that big jump from being a rookie in 2015 and was still considered like this young, exciting player for their future. So it's like, oh, cool. Well, this guy in the first game that I covered in Tennessee, he had an interception, pick six that won them the game against the Titans. And that doesn't seem that long ago to me. And yet now we're talking about somebody being old enough to decline and be a cap casualty, and such is the cycle of life in the NFL. But as far as whether we expected it to happen, we did. When you look at somebody whose contract couldn't be restructured anymore, and when it's basically zero dead, I mean, I think it was a couple million, but not much for dead cap hit. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he really didn't fit very well in the defense last year. They are changing defenses this year to bring in Brian Flores. But when you consider the age and maybe what they thought they would need from him, you'd be talking about having to give him a multi-year extension if you wanted him to stay. They also drafted Brian Asamoah last year, as I think they were looking a year forward, saying we're going to need to find the next Eric Kendricks. And Asamoah, in a very small sample size, played really well for them. They're going to keep Jordan Hicks in an extremely small cap hit for a veteran linebacker, and those two are going to go forward together. But it just, someone had to go, either Hicks or Kendricks, and both are highly respected veteran players. But one of them created a lot more cap space than the other, and the Vikings are extremely, and still to the moment we're talking about, cap strapped. So it was something that they probably didn't love having to do, but, you know, maybe when Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah arrived here last year, knew ultimately that Eric Kendricks was only going to be a Viking for another year.
Yeah, makes sense. And great job crushing your GM's name, by the way. I know I wonder how much practice that took to get it down. We have names out with USC that I have to, like, in the mirror practice over and over again with, and UCLA, so well done there. But yeah, I mean, it makes total sense. We see that all the time in the NFL. You know, it's tough for fans when they see their beloved players for so long and become cap casualties and part of the business. But in my opinion, you know, guy that can still contribute, obviously great leadership skills and whatnot. So, talking about just his play, Matthew, you know, I've seen, you know, whatever you want to call it, people on Twitter, fans, other reporters said that he had kind of a decline year, which maybe by his standards it was, but hey, if a decline year is 137 tackles, sign me up for that. So what can Chargers fans just kind of expect getting from, you know, an older vet like Eric Kendricks in terms of play style, in terms of schematic fit, in terms of intensity, leadership, all that good stuff?
Yeah, and this is something that the Chargers really should keep close in mind because, you know, the influence of the Ed Donatel system is Vic Fangio. That goes for Brandon Staley as well. And I think based on his size, for one, if you're asking Eric Kendricks, who originally was a very undersized linebacker, now more standard, but he's not lanky and he's not tall. And so if you're asking him to drop back in these deep zones and, read and react to a lot of different, pass patterns and stuff behind him and things like that, he's intelligent enough to do that, but I don't know if he's as quick or just naturally lanky enough to be great in that role. I think that was part of the struggle last year, is that his role was, I think it was something like 90% of the time he was playing in zone. And I've always looked at him as someone who kind of, it can be a dog chasing a bone when it comes to a receiving option coming out of the backfield, or a receiver or a tight end, just going after that guy and being great in coverage. There was one play in 2020 that always stuck in my mind where he had to cover Devontae Adams man-to-man on a streak right down the field and covered him 45 yards down the field and broke up the pass from Aaron Rodgers at full speed. I mean, that kind of tells you his ability to run with anybody who he has to cover, but I'm not sure that it's the perfect fit to have him dropping back in these deeper zones. Maybe his experience from last year will help him if he's asked to do that, but that played, in my mind, a big role in why his PFF coverage grade was so poor, his stats in terms of being targeted. That fit matters a lot. And if you look at every other year of his career, last year was the worst year in coverage for Eric Kendricks that he's ever had. So I don't know that he just stopped remembering how to play linebacker, but also there is a huge part of his game is that speed. And so if it goes from 9 to 8, that is something that he's going to have to make up for. And that just happens to everybody who's a linebacker that gets in their 30s. I think that was also part of it for the Vikings, is if you're trying to project forward, how good is he going to be over the next 2 or 3 seasons or something? It's just hard to do with any position of somebody who's into their 30s. But I don't think that the system worked particularly well for him last year. So Brandon Staley has to keep that in mind as he's figuring out the role for Eric Kendricks in LA.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. And I don't know, I'm sure the entire NFL, I'm sure you're not paying as much attention to the Chargers as obviously we would, but we had a guy out here named Drue Tranquill who, outside of Derwin James, I think was kind of the glue of this defense at the linebacker position. And he's obviously a free agent off his rookie deal. And so a lot of fans, a lot of reporters, a lot of just people out here in LA wanted to see the Chargers really retain and re-sign Drue. And now obviously with this move, bringing in Eric, the writing's kind of on the wall. And I think partially the thought process there is Drue is probably going to, command a lot more money in this market. So, however, everything you just said about coverage, that has definitely been a skill set that has lacked from linebackers here in LA, is that the linebackers just have not been great in coverage, whether it's zone or man, anything. So if Eric can bring anything like that to this backing core, I think that'll be a huge upgrade. How is he? Because what they're going to lose in Drue Tranquill, which obviously is not official, but if he is signed elsewhere, is he was used actually a lot in some really fun design blitz packages with Brandon Staley, whether it was twists up the middle or different stunts coming off of tackles. Does Eric Kendricks bring anything to pass rush lane, or is he more of your old school linebacker, plugging holes and covering guys over the middle?
Yeah, I think you'll have to ask him if he remembers how to blitz after Ed Donatel called up the fewest number of blitzes in the league last year. But no, historically, Eric Kendricks has been really good at blitzing. And part of that was he was playing with Mike Zimmer, who was absolutely brilliant at designing those blitzes. But even this year, when Ed Donatel did remember to push the blitz button, Eric Kendricks was mostly effective in doing it. And I think a major part of that is just that so much of Eric Kendricks' game is intelligence. You had him on the show. I covered him for a very long time. I mean, this is one of the most intelligent football players that you're ever going to run across. And I shouldn't even just say football players, intelligent people that you're going to meet. A very aware human being. But he understands nuances and he loves playing the chess game. So when it comes to quarterbacks' cadences, things that he can read at the line of scrimmage, when adjustments are supposed to be made, who's the moving parts out of the backfield and things like that when it comes to pretty much any element. So there's nothing that he's going to be bad at when it comes to that. I think that for linebackers, though, especially middle linebackers, if you're talking about blitzing, a lot of it comes down to that. Are you not tipping off that you're blitzing, or are you intentionally tipping off some things and then dropping back, causing confusion with the quarterback? There's a lot of, I did a story on it actually earlier this year and talked a lot with Jordan Hicks about just some of the small things, the preparation that goes into being ready to, handle the right assignments and everything like that. And for Eric Kendricks, all of that stuff at this point in his career is just totally second nature. So if they're going to use him as a blitzer, and even I have an intern that works with us for Purple Insider who is a statistics major, and she looked deep into some of the statistics and found that his were very effective overall. So I think that all kind of plays into it, and that could be a really good role for him.
Wow. Well, I think Chargers fans are going to be very happy to hear that. So, but overall happy with it. Chargers fans, have been very happy in general with the Vikings because they got Ryan Ficken from you guys, and he has single-handedly turned the Chargers special team unit into the best it's been in what feels like 20 years. So hopefully the same can be said with Eric Kendricks coming to town, or coming back to town, I should say, being from, the LA and also from Fresno before coming to UCLA. So, well, Matthew Coller, don't want to take more of your time. I really appreciate the insight, and always good catching up with you. And I feel like we're always tied some way with LA and the Vikings. Obviously your head coach now comes from LA, and we've gotten stuff from you guys. So always fun catching up and being able to cross promote and do stuff like that. So thanks for taking the time.
Yep, sure thing. And, with the Chargers specifically, they're always likely to have some insane playoff loss, just like the Vikings. And if you're looking for ties together, it's like they are the AFC Vikings. So, but of course, you do a great show anytime you need me on, or if you just want to talk ball, I'm here for you.
Yeah. You guys had the Minneapolis Miracle, so the Chargers are due for some sort of LA miracle, which after last year, they're really due. So, but awesome, man. Thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.